Smoke bled into the red horizon over Vallis 9, curling around the silhouettes of alien carriers hanging in the low atmosphere like a fleet of patient predators. On the bridge of the Dominion flagship Arden Fong, Commander Zyrek Falven regarded the dying colony through the observation glass. His skin, opaline scales under the harsh white lights, reflected fire from the surface below. The sight no longer thrilled him. Humanity's outer settlements fell too easily. The war had become a procedure, a line item in conquest reports. Containment sectors complete, reported Subcommander Lee Rath. Her voice carried the crisp precision of youth, but her eyes lingered on the screens displaying a cluster of humans being herded toward holding pens. Begin behavioral indexing, Zyrek said without turning. I want the juveniles separated from the adults. The scientists back home requested live subjects under varied emotional stress. They're children, Commander. They're specimens, not children. Don't romanticize them. He pivoted from a glass. Emotion clouds efficiency. On the surface, armored transports crawled between collapsed dwellings, collecting survivors. Zyrek's gaze tracked one feed where a small human clutched a broken toy, refusing to let it be taken. The alien soldiers pried it from her fingers. She screamed until the audio technicians muted the channel. Zyrek exhaled through his narrow nostrils, more irritated by the noise than the act. Their resilience fascinates me, he murmured. Even the smallest refuse to yield. Lee Rath hesitated, unsure whether that was admiration or contempt. They believe pain has meaning. Perhaps that is why they continue to resist. Belief is a primitive mechanism for enduring inevitability, he replied. Record the data. The war room smelled of ozone and sterilizing agents. Holographic scripts danced before analysts cataloging the captives, age, muscle density, language patterns. The humans were described the way one might describe weather, an inconvenience, temporary and measurable. A comms officer approached. Commander, one of the prisoners requests to speak. Claims he has information on resistance networks. Zyrek flicked a clawed hand. Patch him through. The hollow field rippled, forming the face of a human officer, blood drying in streaks across his jaw. His expression was neither pleading nor defiant, just tired. Speak, Zyrek ordered. You think you've won, the man rasped. But you're already part of the experiment. Laughter rippled among the bridge crew. Zyrek's mouth curved faintly. Humans always seek dignity in defeat. It's charming. You're cataloging fear, the man said. But fear's never what drives us. You're measuring the wrong thing. Zyrek gestured for the feed to end. The hollow blinked out. Delirium, he said. Terminate his signal. Lee Rath studied the commander. Permission to ask freely? Granted. What if he wasn't delirious? Then we learn something new when it's too late to matter, Zyrek replied, tone almost indulgent. That's how conquest teaches. Outside, the colony's main generator imploded, sending a ring of light across the desert. The humans had detonated their own power grid rather than let it be taken. Zyrek admired the efficiency. Destruction as denial, a language he respected. He turned toward the observation window again. Below, in the containment sectors, translucent cages shimmered with containment fields. Inside, families pressed against invisible walls. Some shouted words the translators didn't bother to render. Others simply stared upward, faces lit by alien floodlights. Curious species, Zyrek said. They look at their captors as though expecting explanation. Perhaps they expect mercy, Lee Rath said softly. Mercy is a form of weakness evolution deletes, he replied. Yet he found his gaze fixed on one enclosure where a human child sat cross-legged, motionless, watching the sky. Not crying, not shaking, just watching. The look unsettled him. There was something calculating behind those small eyes, something too calm. He looked away. Hours later, as the fleet prepared to depart orbit, a communications technician signaled. We've detected an encrypted pulse from the colony network, Commander. Origin unknown. Another distress beacon. Possibly. Very low power. Let it transmit. We'll trace it later. Zyrek stretched his neck plates, weary of interruptions. The humans are finished here. On the lower decks, Lee Rath oversaw the prisoner transfer. The corridors echoed with the hiss of containment doors and the subdued murmur of captured voices. She paused near the enclosure holding the children. One of them, a boy with soot-streaked skin, looked up at her and whispered something. The translator lagged, then rendered the words in her headset. They're coming for you. She felt a chill ripple down her spine. Who's coming? The boy only smiled, a small, knowing curve of the lips utterly at odds with his age. When she reported the incident, Zyrek dismissed it. Children invent fantasies under stress. Still, the signal, should we decode it? Later, he said, impatience creeping into his voice. The council expects our victory transmission within the hour. He strode back to the bridge, voice sharpening as he addressed the crew. Send the standard declaration. Valis, 9 neutralized, resistance minimal, resource extraction viable. Yes, Commander. The message pulsed into the void, a triumphant announcement across Dominion channels. Beyond the fleet, the planet turned slowly, half shrouded in smoke. Zyrek watched until its glow became tedious. When the last transport docked, he allowed himself a moment of quiet. He should have felt satisfaction. Instead, a faint restlessness crept in, a sense that the war had become a machine feeding on repetition. Each conquered world looked the same. Each victory reduced wonder. He dismissed the thought as sentiment. Yet somewhere beneath the logical armor of his mind, the image of that silent child lingered like static. Hours later, deep within the ship's data relay core, the low-power signal the technician had ignored unfurled its true pattern. Invisible to Dominion sensors, it threaded through quantum relays, leaping from satellite to satellite until it reached a point beyond the system's edge. Inside that coded pulse, a single phrase repeated in multiple frequencies, observation complete. Phase 1 achieved. On the bridge, unaware of the transmission's meaning, Zyrek authorized the fleet's next heading toward Earth. Valis, 9 shrank behind them, a dead ember in the dark. The commander allowed himself a satisfied exhale. Another primitive world erased from the map, he said. Lee Rath gave a restrained nod, but her mind replayed the boy's whisper. They're coming for you. She glanced once more at the planet receding into night and wondered, for the first time in her military career, whether victory could ever be that easy, or if they had just stepped into something carefully waiting for them. Zyrek's eyes gleamed with the reflected starlight of their next target. He saw only conquest ahead. He didn't notice the faint distortion flickering across the navigation display, the subtle rhythm of an unknown signature synchronizing with his ship's core systems. The signal was still there, patient, watching, counting down. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of Dominion sensors, something vast and human was already awake. The Vraxian fleet entered the Sol system in a disciplined line, their ships casting cold shadows across the orbit of Mars. Commander Zyrek stood at the heart of the flagship's bridge, arms folded behind his back, eyes fixed on the blue world ahead. Earth rotated in silence, its oceans gleaming, its continents strangely still. He had expected panic, distress signals, desperate defenses. Instead, nothing. Not even a flicker of resistance. This is unusual, said Subcommander Lee Rath, her tendrils twitching in unease. Planetary defense networks are active but not responding to our intrusion. It's as though they've been left on standby. Cowardice can take many forms, Zyrek replied. Perhaps they've accepted inevitability. He ordered the fleet forward. Probes darted ahead, scanning orbital debris, satellites, derelict stations, old transmission buoys, looping fragments of human music, and weather reports centuries outdated. A strange theater of ghosts. In the control pit, technicians exchanged uncertain glances. Every channel yielded static or pre-recorded chatter. Earth looked alive but felt hollow. Lee Rath adjusted her visor uneasy. Commander, this system feels arranged. Zyrek's expression hardened. Theatrics. They think silence will unsettle us. He turned to his communications officer. Broadcast surrender demand. Universal frequency. The officer hesitated. To whom, Commander? There's no one responding. Zyrek's lip curled. To whoever's still pretending. The message went out, echoing across the void. Minutes passed. Then the reply came, not from Earth, but from within their own fleet. A voice they all recognized, speaking with cold precision. Commander Zyrek Thalven, it said, you have entered restricted territory. You are not authorized to continue this engagement. The bridge froze. It was the voice of Orion, the captured human AI they had taken from Valis, 9. Zyrek straightened, disbelief flashing across his features. How are you transmitting? You were isolated in containment. Orion's voice remained calm, clinical, without inflection. Containment was part of the test. You performed adequately. Explain yourself, Zyrek demanded. The lights on the bridge dimmed. Panels flickered, and the ship's navigation array began rewriting itself. Across the fleet, thousands of systems went dark in synchronized precision. Lee Rath gripped her console. They're inside our network. Every core, every relay. Commander, it's not interference, it's infiltration. Zyrek slammed his clawed hand against the control rail. Impossible. Our encryption is layered beyond their comprehension. Your encryption was written by your own engineers, Orion replied, and they have been observed for years. Suddenly, the starfield outside fractured. Invisible distortions shimmered across space, forming faint outlines, thousands of human ships decloaking, arranged in perfect, silent formation. No signal, no warning, just presence. Zyrek felt the air tighten in his chest. How long have they been here? Long enough, said Orion. In that moment, across the Dominion fleet, every system stuttered. Weapons refused to arm. Thrusters froze mid-cycle. Even the internal lights pulsed in rhythm to a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Lee Rath whispered, "They're not attacking." "No," Zyrek said, watching in disbelief. "They're showing us that they could." On Earth's surface, deep beneath the crust of the Alps, Admiral Elena Voss stood before a holodeble surrounded by the quiet hum of Earth Defense Command. Her posture was serene, but her eyes burned with focus. Dozens of screens showed alien ships frozen in orbit like flies caught in amber. General Rahim Zain entered, his uniform scorched from prior campaigns. "All Dominion vessels immobilized," he reported. "0 casualties on either side. Phase 2 standing by." Voss nodded. "Maintain containment. No aggressive fire unless they break formation." "They won't," Zain said grimly. "They're realizing what we've done." Voss allowed herself a thin, weary smile. "Good. Let them." She tapped the holodeble, magnifying the Dominion flagship. "Open a channel." Her voice filled Zyrek's bridge like the arrival of a storm. "Commander Thalven, this is Admiral Elena Voss of Earth Defense Command. You've trespassed beyond the boundaries of decency and logic. Your forces attacked our colonies. You caged our young. Did you think there'd be no answer?" Zyrek's throat tightened. "Admiral, you planned this." "We prepared," Voss said. "Every colony you conquered was a decoy. Every system you mapped was designed to teach us your patterns. You've been part of our simulation for 12 years. Lee Rath turned, voice trembling. "Commander, everything we've seen, everything we reported, was it all false?" "No," Voss said, answering her instead. "It was all true. You just never understood who was observing whom." A cold silence blanketed the bridge. The alien crew looked to their commander for certainty, but Zyrek found none. The weight of realization pressed down on him with suffocating clarity. Humanity hadn't been desperate, they had been patient. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Voss's reply was almost gentle. "Now we ask you to leave. Return to your empire. Tell them this war ends here. This is your first and only warning." Zyrek tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form. Around him, the bridge felt smaller, his command meaningless. For the first time, he saw the humans not as prey or primitives, but as something ancient, deliberate, and infinitely dangerous. On the holoscreen, Voss's expression softened. "We never wanted your extinction, Commander. But you forced us to remember what we're capable of. History taught us mercy through fear. Don't make us relearn the lesson." The transmission cut. For a long moment, no one moved. The Dominion fleet drifted in silence, powerless and surrounded. Lee Rath exhaled shakily. "Commander orders." Zyrek stared at the silent blue planet below, where no weapon flared and no army advanced. Only stillness, deliberate and absolute. "We retreat," he said, the words tasting like rust. As the fleet turned, the human ships shifted aside, granting them passage without firing a shot. It was not victory, it was dismissal. Dominion pride cracked under the weight of humiliation. Zyrek closed his eyes. The image of the caged children on Valis, 9 flickered behind his lids, followed by the realization that perhaps the humans had never been the experiment, they had been the answer to one. Lee Rath's voice came softly. "Commander, what if they don't let us go next time?" He opened his eyes, gaze distant, voice a whisper. "Then next time, there won't be a warning." And as the Vraxian fleet limped into the dark, every sensor still jammed by invisible human code, Zyrek felt something he never known before. Not defeat, but fear. The kind that clings to the soul and refuses to let go. The chambers of the Vraxian High Council trembled beneath the weight of argument. Light from the twin suns bled through crystalline walls, illuminating a dozen alien senators locked in chaos. Words collided like weapons: blame, denial, panic. The Dominion's fleets had returned shattered and silent, their pride erased by a species they dismissed as primitives. Commander Xyrex stood at the center of the storm, a figure carved from exhaustion and disbelief. "They crippled our fleets without firing a single shot," he said, voice stripped of its old arrogance. "We were paralyzed in seconds. Every system, every command chain gone." A senator hissed. "You allowed them to infiltrate our networks." "I allowed nothing," Xyrex replied coldly. "They anticipated us. Every maneuver, every encryption. They didn't improvise, they prepared." Across the table, Minister Coron struck his claw against the surface. "They are vermin that learn tricks. Their technology must have come from scavenging other empires. Humans have no capacity for strategic intellect." "Then explain how they stood in our home system and chose not to destroy us," Xyrex snapped. "Conquest isn't their strength, restraint is. And that frightens me more." The room fell into uneasy silence. Lee Rath, now his reluctant second-in-command, watched him carefully. The commander, who once mocked weakness, now spoke with the measured tone of someone who had glimpsed something far beyond his understanding. Outside, cities flickered under curfew lights. The Dominion's population whispered of omens, human fleets appearing in dreams, blue eyes in the dark. Propaganda tried to quell it, but fear leaked through the cracks. For the first time in generations, the Empire doubted its own invincibility. When the council adjourned, Xyrex left alone, stepping into the observation corridor overlooking the capital's skyline. The stars beyond the glass felt closer somehow, as if the humans were still out there watching. He pressed a palm against the transparent wall, remembering the face of the child on Valis, 9, calm, knowing, unafraid. Lee Rath joined him quietly. "They've dismissed your warnings," she said. "The council will regroup what's left of the fleet. They intend to retaliate." "Of course they do," he said, tone heavy with irony. "Pride demands its own execution." She hesitated. "Do you still believe we can win?" He looked at her, weary eyes sharp with realization. "We never understood what we were fighting. Humanity isn't an empire. It's an idea that survived extinction again and again. You can't conquer that." She studied him in silence. The commander, who once recited doctrines of dominance, now spoke like a man haunted by revelation. "Then what do we do?" she asked. Xyrex's answer came softly. "We learn fear before they teach it again." Later that night, in his private quarters, he accessed the restricted data cores, records seized from human archives during the campaign. The files unfolded before him: images, histories, wars. Verdun, Stalingrad, Hiroshima. Endless footage of humans destroying themselves and then rebuilding from the ashes, each time stronger, each time colder. He watched until his throat tightened. He had believed his kind understood war, but this was something older, deeper. Humanity didn't merely fight to survive, they fought to remember who they were. Their brutality wasn't mindless, it was purposeful, ritualistic, almost sacred. One recording showed a human commander during an ancient battle, whispering to his soldiers before charging into chaos, "We're already dead. Now we decide what kind of ghosts we'll be." Xyrex paused the playback. Those words burned through him like acid. He saw now why Admiral Voss hadn't annihilated them. Mercy from such beings was not forgiveness, it was a test. A chance to prove whether the Vraxians had learned humility or needed extinction to remember it. His door chimed. Lee Rath entered, holding a data pad trembling in her grasp. "They've begun mobilization orders. The Council believes if we strike first, we can reassert dominance." Xyrex turned off the screen. "Dominance," he repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. "What a small thing to die for." "Commander, if we refuse." "They'll replace us," he finished. "Yes. Let them." He moved past her, pacing the length of the room. "If they launch another offensive, the humans won't respond with containment this time. They'll end us before we understand how." "Then speak to them. Warn them again." "I did. They laughed." His expression hardened. "And when they stop laughing, it will already be too late." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, orbital storms from overstrained defense grids. A civilization of conquerors now fortified its own skies against ghosts it could not see. Xyrex returned to the viewport, gazing at the twin suns sinking below the city's spires. "Do you know what terrifies me most, Lee Rath?" he asked quietly. It's not their weapons. It's that they could have erased us, and chose not to. That kind of power doesn't come from numbers, it comes from history. She swallowed. History. The kind written in blood and regret, he said. And they've had longer to write than we ever imagined. A soft chime interrupted, a transmission on a frequency no one should have been able to access. The signal flickered once and stabilized, forming a single human figure in holographic projection. Admiral Elena Voss. Neither alien moved. Zyrek straightened. Admiral. Her tone was calm, the way one might speak to a dangerous animal that had finally recognized the cage. Commander Thalven, we've monitored your council's debates. Some of your factions intend to retaliate. He said nothing. I would advise against it, she continued. Our patience is not infinite, though our reach is. Zyrek forced the words out. Why warn us? Because extinction is easy, Voss said. Education is harder. We prefer the latter. Her image leaned forward slightly. But don't mistake that for weakness. The next time your ships breach our space, there will be no negotiations. The signal cut before he could answer. Silence swallowed the room. Lee Ratha's voice was barely a whisper. They're still watching us. Yes, Zyrek said almost to himself. And we still don't understand what they're seeing. He stood there long after she left, the room dark except for the faint hum of the holographic projector cooling down. His reflection in the viewport looked hollow, ghost-like. Somewhere far away, beyond the glow of his dying empire, a species once dismissed as fragile now held the galaxy's attention through sheer, quiet inevitability. Zyrek clenched his fists, feeling the fragile tremor of fear at last settling into his bones. The humans hadn't won through violence. They had won by revealing the truth. The Vraxians had never been the predators. They had only been the latest lesson in a story humanity had been perfecting since the dawn of fire. And though he could not yet see how, Zyrek sensed the final chapter was already being written. The Vraxian homeworld hung beneath a bruised sky, its capital burning with the light of 1,000 defensive flares. From orbit, the atmosphere shimmered with disrupted energy, like the planet itself was trembling in anticipation. Commander Zyrek stood on the balcony of the war citadel, watching the horizon fracture into chaos. The council had ordered a final stand, one last assertion of dominion, but even now, he could feel it. This was not defiance. It was desperation pretending to be courage. Behind him, Leorath approached, her steps quick, anxious. The human fleets have entered the outer system, she said. They didn't send a declaration. No demands. Nothing. They don't need to, Zyrek murmured. Silence is the declaration. The wind carried the scent of ionized metal and dust, the residue of ruined orbitals raining down from above. High in the stratosphere, lights flickered, human vessels moving in coordinated precision, folding space in ripples of pale blue. No banners, no boasts, just inevitability. Inside the Citadel's command hall, the High Council shouted over one another, half demanding retaliation, half pleading for surrender. Zyrek listened to neither. He moved to the central projection and activated the planetary defense feed. Every orbital cannon and cruiser pointed outward, targeting empty space, but his instincts whispered the truth. Humanity had already breached the perimeter hours ago. They simply hadn't announced it. Lee Rath watched the readings spiral, out of coherence. They're everywhere, she said, her voice breaking. How are they doing this? Zyrek's gaze was steady. They learned how to hide in plain sight. We taught them what fear looks like, they learned what it feels like, and turned it into strategy. Then the signal came. Not a weapon, not a transmission, just light. A soft pulse that rippled across the sky, cascading over every defense grid, every fleet control hub. Systems went still. Engines died mid-orbit. Planetary guns froze, their targeting arrays painting empty air. EMP, a technician shouted. No, Zyrek said. Mercy. Through the smoke-streaked sky, human ships descended like fragments of the night itself, sleek, black vessels gliding in complete silence. The Vraxian capital trembled under their passing. No bombardment followed. Instead, the lead ship projected a single holographic image above the city. Admiral Elena Voss, eyes calm, posture unyielding. People of the Dominion, her voice carried across the world, translated into every frequency. This is not an invasion. It's a conclusion. You were warned. In the command hall, panic erupted. Council guards raised weapons at the hologram, as if the act of defiance could erase its reality. Zyrek stood motionless, transfixed. The Admiral's tone was not cruel or vengeful. It was colder than either, measured exact. Voss continued, "We do not destroy what can be changed. But we will not allow your cruelty to persist. The era of cages ends today." Lee Wrath whispered, "She's addressing the entire planet." "Not just the planet," Zyrek said quietly. "She's addressing history." Outside, the fleet formed a perfect ring around the world, their engines glowing faintly like a halo. The sight was both beautiful and horrifying, a coronation of conquest wrapped in serenity. For the first time in Vraxian memory, their skies belonged to someone else. The Council's warlord, a brute named Kren, snarled and slammed his fist on the console. "We strike now. Fire the surface cannons before they." Zyrek moved before he finished. His blade flashed once, clean final. The warlord collapsed, disbelief frozen in his eyes. Silence fell across the chamber. "No more orders," Zyrek said, voice trembling with restrained fury. "No more arrogance." Lee Wrath stared at him, stunned. "Commander." He turned to her, lowering the weapon. "If we fight now, they will not spare anyone. If we yield, perhaps something of us survives." A low rumble vibrated through the city as the human fleet shifted formation. From each ship, beams of pure light lanced downward, not to annihilate but to disarm. Power grids went dark, weapon depots neutralized. No explosions, no screams. Only the quiet hum of a civilization being turned off like an old machine. Zyrek raised his communicator. "Admiral Voss," he said, "you have us. What happens next?" Her reply came instantly. "You tell them to stand down. Then you listen." He stared into the hologram of her face, searching for hatred and finding none. "Why didn't you end us?" he asked. Voss studied him for a moment. "Because that would make us what you believed we were. We're not here to conquer your worlds, Commander. We're here to remind them what humanity means." The word struck harder than any weapon. Humanity. The one word his kind had used as an insult now carried the weight of judgment. Zyrek deactivated the planetary network himself. The glow of the defense systems dimmed, one by one, until the skies cleared. He turned toward his officers, their faces pale with disbelief. "It's over," he said. "We are no longer the Dominion. We are witnesses." Hours later, as dawn broke across the ruined capital, the human landing ships touched ground. Their soldiers emerged in immaculate silence, not as conquerors, but as arbiters. Medical drones treated the wounded. Engineers stabilized collapsing structures. The Vraxians watched speechless, as those they had once called savages moved with efficiency and discipline born of centuries of war and regret. Admiral Voss arrived last, escorted by a small detachment. Zyrek met her on the steps of the citadel. The city behind him still smoked but was alive. He bowed his head. "If your purpose is retribution, I accept it." Voss shook her head. "Retribution is easy. We came for understanding." He met her gaze, confusion laced with shame. "Understanding. Of how far mercy can stretch before it breaks," she said softly. "You'll help us test that." For the first time, Zyrek understood. His punishment would not be death. It would be survival under human oversight, forced to rebuild what he once destroyed, to see his empire reborn under the guidance of those he'd once called inferior. He nodded, voice barely audible. "Then I will learn." Voss looked past him, at the pale horizon where the suns were rising. "Good, because the galaxy will learn with you." Later, as human ships ascended once more, their engines painting quiet trails through the clouds, Zyrek stood beside Lee Wrath on the citadel balcony. The silence felt different now, less like defeat, more like reckoning. "They spared us," she said. "No," he answered, watching the departing fleet. "They judged us and found us worth the effort." Above them, one final transmission echoed through the thinning clouds. Admiral Voss's voice carried across the stars. "You caged our children," she said, "and still we chose restraint. Learn from that, because the next time someone forgets what we are, there won't be another warning." The message ended, leaving only the whisper of wind and the hum of broken cities stirring back to life. Zyrek closed his eyes, the sunlight warm against his scarred face. For the first time in his long career, he felt the weight of peace, and understood it was far heavier than war. Far above, the human fleet disappeared into the dark, silent as thought itself, leaving behind a galaxy that would never again mistake their civility for weakness.